Hello and welcome to Daf Yomi. We're doing Menachot Daf 2 Amud B. Thank you for taking time to join me, and we'll dive straight in. The Gemara concludes from the proof from the verse, and with regard to a gift offering, is it permitted to deviate from the protocol Abba Nisho? The footnote: V'indova mi sherei l'shonuye ba. According to Rashi and Zavachim 2b, the source for the prohibition against deviating from the sacrificial process of any offering is the phrase, neither shall it be attributed lo yesh hashev, Leviticus 7:18, which may also be translated as he shall not intend, i.e., it's prohibited for one to have improper intentions with regard to offerings. See Zavachim 29b. See also the Rambam says, 18:2, who writes that having improper intentions with regard to an offering is tantamount to blemishing it. Many commentaries maintain that the Rambam is referring only to those intentions of disqualifying an offering entirely, i.e., e.g., the intent to sacrifice it outside its designated time. See also the Rambam's addendum to Sefer Mitzvot, prohibition 4. Clearly one may not do so. Accordingly, if one of the sacrificial rites of a meal offering is performed for the sake of a different meal offering, it is still prohibited to perform any of its other sacrificial rites improperly. The Mishnah teaches that all the meal offerings from which a handful was removed not for their sake are fit for sacrifice, but they do not fulfill the obligation of the owner. The Gemara suggests, let us say that the Mishnah is not according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. As is taught in the Braita, Rabbi Shimon says, all meal offerings from which a handful was removed not for their sake are fit for sacrifice, and they even satisfy the obligation of the owner. The Braita continues, conversely, consecrated animals that were sacrificed not for their sake do not fulfill the obligation of the owner, as in this regard, meal offerings are not similar to slaughtered offerings. The difference is that when one removes a handful from a pan meal offering for the sake of a deep pan meal offering, a pan used for a pan meal offering was shallow, and a minimum amount of oil was added to the flour, which rendered the meal offering relatively hard. In contrast, the pan used for a deep pan meal offering was deeper, as indicated by its name, and there was a significant amount of oil added to the flour, which rendered the meal offering soft. 63a. According to some commentaries, the pan was an entirely flat surface with no rim, whereas the deep pan had surrounding rims, of the Rambam. This mode of preparation proves that this is in fact for the sake of a pan meal offering, as the two offerings differ in appearance. Similarly, with regard to a dry meal offering, e.g. the meal offering of a sinner which contains no oil, whose handful is removed for the sake of a meal offering that is mixed with oil, his mode of preparation proves that it is for the sake of a dry meal offering, and one's improper intent is therefore disregarded. But with regard to slaughtered offerings, it is not so, as there is one manner of slaughter for all offerings, and one manner of sprinkling the blood for all offerings, and one manner of collecting the blood for all offerings. Since the differentiation between slaughtered offerings is established only through intention, one who sacrifices an animal offering not for its own sake does not fulfill the obligation of the owner. Rabbi Shimon apparently disagreed with the Tana of the Mishnah on two counts. First, he claims that if a handful of the meal offering was removed not for its own sake, it satisfies the obligation of the owner, whereas the Mishnah teaches that the obligation is not fulfilled. Second, Rabbi Shimon does not differentiate between the meal offering of a sinner and the meal offering of jealousy and the other types of meal offerings. The Gemara comments, this works out well. The Mishnah can be explained according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, according to Rabbi Ashit, who says in 3b, in a resolution of the two apparently contradictory statements of Rabbi Shimon, here where Rabbi Shimon says that the meal offering is fit and fulfills the owner's obligation, he's referring to a case where one states that he's removing a handful from a pan meal offering for the sake of a deep pan, i.e. he mentioned only the vessel, not the type of meal offering. Conversely, there where Rabbi Shimon says the meal offering does not satisfy the obligation, he's referring to a case where one states he's removing a handful from a pan meal offering for the sake of a deep pan meal offering. Accordingly, can be explained that the Mishnah is referring to a case where one removes a handful from a meal offering for the sake of another meal offering, which is why it does not satisfy the obligation of the owner. But according to the statement of Rabbi Rava, who resolved that contradiction in a different manner, what can be said? The Gemara elaborates, and if you would say that the contradiction addressed by Rav Ashi is resolved as Rabbah answers, this is problematic. Rabbah resolved the contradiction as follows. Here where Rabbi Shimon says that the meal offering satisfied the owner's obligation, he's referring to a change of sanctity, i.e. was sacrificed for the sake of another type of meal offering. Whereas there, where Rabbi Shimon says that it does not fulfill the owner's obligation, he's referring to a change of ownership, e.g. the meal offering of Reuben was sacrificed for the sake of Shimon. The Gemara explains that the reason this is problematic is that if one accepts the Rabbi's resolution, how can the Mishnah be explained in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon? The Mishnah is clearly discussing the case of change of sanctity as it teaches. How can these rites perform for their sake and then not for their sake, whereas the offering does not suffer the obligation? Is in a case where one initially removed the handful for the sake of the meal offering of a sinner, and then for the sake of voluntary meal offering. This is the change of a different type of meal offering. And alternatively, we would say that the contradiction addressed by Rashi is resolved by, as Rava answers, this is equally problematic. Rava resolved the contradiction as follows. Here, where Rabbi Shimon says that the meal offering satisfies the owner's obligation, it's referring to a case where one removes a handful from a meal offering for the sake of another meal offering. Whereas there, where Rabbi Shimon says that it does not satisfy the owner's obligation, he's referring to a case where one removes a handful from a meal offering for the sake of a slaughtered offering. The Gemara explains that if one accepts Rava's resolution, the Mishnah cannot be in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. The Mishnah is discussing a case where one removes a handful from a meal offering for the sake of another meal offering, as it teaches. How are these rites performed not for their sake and for their sake? It is a case where one removed a handful for the sake of a voluntary meal offering, and then for the sake of a meal offering of a sinner. The Gemara concluded, rather, according to the resolutions offered by Rava and Rava, it's clear the Mishnah is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. The Gemara cites the advice that is the basis for the apparent contradiction between the statements of Rabbi Shimon, which is mentioned in the previous discussion, and a sage raised a contradiction from one statement of Rabbi Shimon and another statement of Rabbi Shimon. As is taught in the Brayta, Rabbi Shimon says that the verse written concerning the meal offering is most sacred, as a sin offering and as a guilt offering, Leviticus 6:10, indicates that there's some meal offerings whose halacha is like that of a sin offering. The chatos, a sin offering. If what you commits in transgression punishable by karet, i.e. exceeding from the world to come, is if performed intentionally, he's obligated to bring a sin offering. If he did so unwittingly. A sin offering brought by an individual is either a female lamb or goat. It must be in its first year. It must be slaughtered in the northern section of the temple courtyard, and its blood is collected there and sprinkled on each of the four corners of the altar. The fat of the sin offering is burned on the altar, and its meat is eaten by the priest. Other sin offerings are brought in certain cases as part of the purification rites and the conclusion of a period of ritual impurity, e.g. that of a woman who has given birth, that of a leper, and that of a Nazarite. And there are yet other sin offerings that serve to atone for the community, as well as special sin offerings brought by the leaders of the people to atone for transgression. And there are some whose halacha is like that of a guilt offering. Rabbi Shimon elaborates, the halacha with regard to the meal offering of a sinner is like that of a sin offering. Therefore, if one removed a handful from it not for its own sake, it is disqualified, just as a sin offering that was slaughtered not for its own sake. Conversely, the halacha with regard to voluntary meal offering is like that of a guilt offering. Therefore, if one removed a handful from it not for its own sake, it is valid, like a guilt offering that was slaughtered not for its own sake. And Shimon adds, and a voluntary meal offering is like a guilt offering in another aspect as well. Just as a guilt offering is valid, but it does not affect acceptance, i.e. does not satisfy the owner's obligation, so too a voluntary meal offering is valid, but it does not affect acceptance. Rabbi Shimon here apparently contradicts his ruling that all meal offerings from which a handful was removed, not for their sake, satisfy the obligation of the owner. Rabbi said in resolution on this contradiction, this is not difficult. Here Rabbi Shimon says that meal offerings satisfy the owner's obligation. He is referring to a change in sanctity, i.e. it was sacrificed for the sake of another type of meal offering. Whereas there, where he says it does not fulfill the owner's obligation, he is referring to a change of owner, e.g. the meal offering Reuben was sacrificed for the sake of Shimon. Abai said to Rabbah, now consider the fact that the merciful one disqualifies the meal offering due to improper intent derived from the Torah's comparison. According to Rashi, the Gemara is referring to the comparison cited here that of a meal offering to a sin offering or guilt offering. Tosfot explained that the Gemara is referring to the conclusions of Vacham 8a. The qualification of all offerings, sacrifices, and improper intent is derived from the comparison of other types of offerings to a peace offering. Leviticus 7:37, the sage derived from a verse Now, a piece having been sacrificed to say the Rechem 4a, see commentary attributed to the Rashba, and meal offerings, sin offerings, and guilt offerings. If so, what difference is there to me if there was a change in Sakti, and what difference is there to me if there was a change in owner? In the case of a guilt offering, either of these changes prevents from satisfying the obligation of the owner. Rambam said Abaye, the claim that its mode of preparation proves one's intent. Rabbi Shimon states in explanations of why offerings are disqualified through improper intent is based on logical reasoning. Rabbi Shimon interprets the reason behind the mitzvah in the verse and draws halachic conclusions based on that interpretation. Many sages explain the rationales for particular mitzvot. Rabbi Shimon is unique in that he would draw halachic conclusions to such interpretations. He claims that just as halachot are learned through our 40 influences, paradigms, and other methods, they may be derived from rationales to mitzvot, whether or not the Torah explicitly states these rationales. Significance of Rabbi Shimon's method in this context is as follows. Since the Torah juxtaposes meal offerings to animal offerings, one might have thought that there is no reason to differentiate between a change of sanctity and a change of owner, according to the principle that when there is an analogy based on juxtaposition, all relevant conclusions are inferred from the analogy. Nevertheless, in the light of the rationale of improper intent, according to which only intent that is recognizably false disqualifies an offering, there is a reason to differentiate between these two types of changes. See commentary attributed to the Rashba. And draws Allah conclude based on that interpretation. Rabbi continues, this is significant. As Rabbi Shimon holds that the merit of one disqualifies improper intent that is not recognizably false. What does that mean? There's a fundamental disagreement between the commentaries with regard to the nature of the disqualification of offerings through improper intent. According to some, improper intent alone disqualifies an offering without any verbal articulation of such intent. And the priest is deemed credible if he claims that he sacrificed an offering with improper intent, said the Rambam Levitva. By contrast, many commentaries maintain that improper intentions must be expressed verbally in order to disqualify an offering. Rashi tells for the Ozurur Eshkol. According to this opinion, the reason the Gemara refers to the intention of the sellers rather than their expression is that it is ultimately the improper intention that disqualifies an offering, and the verbal articulation is merely an expression of his intent. Alternatively, in referring to intent, the Gemara follows the language of the verse that discusses improper intention to state, neither shall it be attributed Loi Hashev, Leviticus 7:18, which has the root Chet Shin Bet, which is also root for thinking. I will show a distinction between intent that is not recognizably false and intent that is recognizably false. Apparently, then support to the second opinion, since if intent alone was sufficient to disqualify an offering without any verbal expression, and improper intentions will be indiscernible. I.e., when the intent is not clear, contradiction to the sacrificial rites performed. The intent to sacrifice an offering for the sake of another owner does not include a change in the sacrificial rites and therefore disqualifies the offering. The merit of one does not disqualify improper intent that is recognizably false and contradicts the sacrificial rites performed. E.g., if one removes a handful from a pan meal offering for the sake of a deep pan meal offering, as the different substance itself indicates that it is a pan meal offering. The Gemara lists several questions with regard to Rabba's statement, for which it provides a mnemonic, a simon, a mnemonic. Because the Talmud was studied orally for many generations, mnemonic devices were used as memory aids for various series of statements and the order in which they were taught. Burnt offering, pinch and squeeze. Bird sin offering in the most sacred order, offerings of lesser sanctity. The Gemara first asks, but if that is so, then that only intent is not recognizably false disqualifies an offering. Then in the case of a bird burnt offering where one pinched, and malika, pinching, doves and pigeons brought as offerings in the temple were not killed by ritual slaughter with a knife as all offerings were, but rather by pinching the nape of their necks. This is considered expression.